أهلا وسهلا. Right now we're going to talk about active participles in Arabic, or what we would call in Arabic اسم الفاعل. فاعل, a fa'il means a doer. Someone or something that does or performs an action based on the verb from which it's derived. We get a lot of really useful nouns and adjectives from this paradigm, and the good news is that it tends to be pretty regular and predictable once we understand how it works. You probably know a lot of asma fa'il already. They're all over the place in Arabic. For example, the word for student, طالب, comes from a verb يطلب, meaning to ask or demand. So a طالب is literally in Arabic an asker, a demander, someone who's demanding knowledge, and it means student. You know probably the word ضابط, officer, like in the military or in the police force, and the verb يضبط kind of means to create order, to keep under control. A writer or an author in Arabic would be a katib, from a verb that you probably know, yaktub, to write. And if you were talking about being a resident of a place, or maybe in Levantine or Egyptian colloquial, if you were saying, I live in such and such a place, you might say, أنا ساكن في, wherever it might be, from the verb يسكن. All of these are Form 1 verbs, and all of these are Form 1 asma fa'il. Notice that they follow the exact same vowel pattern, and they have the exact same extras as this word fa'il, where the fa, ayn, and lam are stand-ins for our real meaningful root, right, that's shared. So we have طالب, ضابط, كاتب, ساكن. Same vowel pattern in every single case. Of course, if we were referring to a female, student or police officer or author or resident, we would just tack a ta marbuta onto the end of those. That's really it. It's that simple for Form 1. For all of the other verb forms, the derived verb forms, we can also make asma fa'il. We just have slightly different patterns, and we have 2 through 10, so there are 10 forms that potentially we need to learn how to manipulate, but there's some good news, which is it's all very regular. If you know how to make an ism fa'il in Form 2, you know how to make an ism fa'il from any Form 2 verb that you're ever going to encounter. Pretty much. Same thing for all the other forms. And the other good news is that often they tend to share characteristics with the verbs. So if you have a handle on how the different verb forms are constructed, you can tend to make pretty decent predictions about how things are going to happen. For example, in Form 5, we add the extra ta to the beginning of the judr, and in Form 5, ism fa'il, we do the same thing. Notice that from 2 through 10, all of the asma fa'il begin with a meme with a dhamma on it, and that the second to last letter of the judr has a kasra. This is true all the way down the line. So if you hear a word, a new unfamiliar word, that starts with a meme with a dhamma on it and has a kasra on the second to last letter of its judr, you can make a pretty decent prediction that you're dealing with an ism fa'il, right? Again, the doer of an action. So let's take a look at a couple of examples. We know one word for a person who teaches, an ustad, right? A professor. But if we just wanted to talk about a teacher, one who teaches, we could create an ism fa'il from that same pattern, taking the verb yudarris, now I can tell yudarris is Form 2, right? Because of the vowels and because of that shadda, I know I can recognize that it sounds just like all the other Form 2 verbs on earth. And now I want to put it into this pattern. So I'm going to lose the conjugation at the beginning or the end, and then I'm going to put on the meme with the dhamma, and I'm going to keep my judr in the same spot relative to the extra letters and sounds I'm adding, and I wind up with mudarris, a teacher. How about another example? The verb يساعد, Form 3, I can tell because it's got that alif and the dhamma at the beginning and the kasra here on the second to last letter of the judr. I've got that paradigm kind of settled in my head. So if I wanted to talk about someone or something who was a helper or an assistant, I would, again, lose the conjugation, pop on the meme, and wind up with مساعد. If we wanted to talk about an assistant professor, that would be the way to do it. In Arabic, we could say أستاذ مساعد, or if we were talking about a grammatically feminine professor, we could say أستاذة مساعدة. That would be the normal way to do it. One more example. To say listen in Arabic, we would say يستمع. So if we wanted to refer to a listener of the radio, someone listening to a sports announcement, I would again drop my conjugation, tack on the meme, keep my judr, and also keep the extra that's part of the form, that ta, that's part of Form 8, and wind up with مستمع, a listener. That's something that you hear a lot on broadcast media. If you're listening to the BBC in Arabic, they'll say, Ya mustami'een, hello listeners, something like that. If we want to make any of the derived forms plural, forms 2 through 10, there's great news. We can do that by tacking on the normal regular plurals, the waw noon or ya noon paradigms for masculine or mixed groups, and the alif ta for feminine groups. So if I wanted to talk about a lot of female assistant professors, I could just say أستاذات مساعدات. Again, because they're human, I'm using the sound plural. If they were non-human plurals, that were feminine with ta marbuta, or if they were non-human plurals that weren't feminine, I could get away with having the adjective look as though it were singular feminine. So for listeners here, I could just say مستمعون. Form 1 tends to be less predictable. Form 1 is probably going to take a broken plural, but there are a couple of broken plurals that are really, really common that we can anticipate. As a matter of fact, all of these nouns, all of these Form 1 nouns, take the same broken plural in the same pattern. فعال. So, assuming that I'm talking about a masculine or mixed group for the moment, if I were talking about a group, not just one talib, but many, I would say طلاب. More than one officer, ضباط. More than one writer, كتاب. More than one resident, if we're talking about the residents, the population of a city, I could say سكان. So it's not quite regular, can't count on it 100%, but it's a very common broken plural for Form 1 ism fa'il. And for all of the other derived asma fa'il, we can use normal, regular plural endings, which is great, saves us a lot of time. Not every single verb in every single form is going to have a derived active participle that is actually used. In theory, we could do it, but it might be a little unique. It might have kind of a strange flavor. For example, we know the word talib, student, which doesn't come from study, it comes from ask or demand, but it's just the normal word for student. We could, in theory, take the verb yadrus, which is form 1, and put it into that fa'il pattern and wind up with daris. We could do that and people would probably understand us, but it would come across as marked, a little bit like saying, I am a studier of such and so in English. Is that exactly wrong? Perhaps not quite, but it's not what's usually said. We would say student. We have a slightly less regular word. But it's really great to get a handle on these because once you figure out how these forms work, if you can match it up with your knowledge of meaningful judhur, meaningful roots, you can save a lot of dictionary time. You can save a lot of time looking things up if you can say, aha, I recognize that it's an ism fa'il pattern, that it's the doer of such and such an action, so I can conclude safely, even if I don't know the exact definition, I can conclude what the word means, more or less. And you can start making up some of your own words from all the verbs that you know. It's essentially multiplying your vocabulary in Arabic by 15 or 20% if you consider that every verb you know theoretically has an ism fa'il, which makes knowing ism fa'il and being able to comprehend it and deploy it in your own speech and writing a very, very powerful tool.